So I just wanted to go over what happens if you ever go into, like, let's say you go into week 4 and something is in week 4 and it doesn't list a deadline for it, or it lists a deadline that's for like 2018, or it lists a deadline that's for like 2025 or next month or something. What do you do? If it's in the week 4 materials and the due date doesn't match up with week 4, what do you do? Or there's no deadline, what do you do?
Well, contact you.
Yeah, you send me an email and say, hey, this doesn't have a deadline. Is this due in week 2? And what's my answer? Mm-hmm. 99.9% of the time, the answer is if it's in week 4, you do it in week 4. Yes? Okay. So I want to remind you that you can open a week and do everything in that week, okay, by that Sunday deadline, period. Okay, the only thing that's ever going to be due earlier is going to be to the discussion board, and nothing that appears in that week is due later than the end of that week, ever. Ever. So if you see something that says it's due later than the end of that week, check with me. Okay? Or don't believe it and just turn it in. Because what happened with, and I'll wrap myself out a little bit, I have a mini-term class, and we talked about an assignment that was due for them at the end of week 2, and it didn't have a deadline in it, and they didn't do it. And now they have to all do it tonight, and it's overdue. And they're all a little mad because they're like, but it didn't have a deadline in it. I was like, it was in week 2. This is a mini term and we can't afford to get behind. And I wasn't mad at them. It was just a mistake that it didn't have a deadline. I'm not mad at them, but I need to make sure everybody knows if it's in week 2, it's due at the end of week 2. Period. Amen. No further discussion. You don't even need to ask. If you see it in week 2, you should turn it in. Yeah? You can email and get clarification, and I will confirm it, and I will fix it before too many other people see the error. And I love that. I love Portia's answer. Let me know, and then I can fix it for the whole class. Send out an alert, right? That's the best course of action, because then I can not only do you not fall prey to the problem, but we can fix the problem, right? So that's the best thing to do. But if I don't respond and it's in week 2, do it. Yes? Okay, so far we haven't hit that issue. So if it was in week 2, it should have been done. Does anybody have questions about the work that was due in week 2? I'm going to screen share looking at week 2. Is there anything in week 2 that you still have questions about?
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to make sure on the old Indian legends that we have to talk about each, it have 4 sections.
Mm-hmm.
That we have to talk about each section when we was doing like the summary, paraphrase, and quotation.
No, not necessarily. You could choose just one section to write about there, and that would be acceptable.
Okay, just making sure.
Yep. Mm-hmm. That's a smart question. Are there any other questions about last week's work?
Okay. The assignment that says summary, paraphrase, and quotation.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I know you talked about that, and we have the little thing in there. But for some reason, I don't know whether I confused this with the discussion board we had to do, and I thought that applied to the discussion board we were doing. So this was a separate assignment, am I correct?
Yes, ma'am. There are 2 separate assignments. They were both practicing the same skills, right? So in the discussion board, you were writing a 10 to 12 sentence paragraph observing, but you were making a connection between that and something familiar to you. Okay. It did ask you to quote the essential passage. So there was some quoting that I asked you for there. But in the assignment, it wasn't so much making that connection as 10 to 12 sentences, choose one of the Native American texts to teach to a high school reader who has not yet read it. And you are just practicing those skills of summary, paraphrase, and quotation as you present that piece to a younger reader. Yeah?
Okay.
Yeah.
And by any chance, did you find the first paper that I emailed you and asked about, could you see a discussion board?
I haven't graded the discussion boards yet, and when I do go in, I will take a look at that. I'll grade those this week, and if something's missing, I'll absolutely let you know. But I
Okay,
haven't
I
had a
actually
chance to do that yet.
I went back and just did it again just in case.
Excellent. So it might then at worst it'll be there twice, right?
I just want the first one.
Okay, fantastic. I'll double check those today, and I'll definitely let you know. I wasn't working over the weekend, and this morning I taught from 8:30 to 11, so I haven't had a chance to go into the grade book yet. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Are there other questions about week 2 before we dive into week 3? All right, let's open. Yes, ma'am?
Yes, yeah.
Is it okay if we still turn in that summary paraphrase assignment today?
Yes, it is. I will always take late work in this class. Let's talk about late work for a second. In our syllabus, it says that late work will be marked with a 70%. It's capped. Late work is capped. I try not to be a jerk about it. In some classes, I am even able, when I know almost everybody is hitting their deadlines and doing a decent job, I can even just kind of disregard that tool. However, I've got a 102 class right now where more than half the class is not keeping up. And I'm going to need that capped at 70% to motivate people to get their work done on time, right? So we try to motivate with the carrot. That leads you to it. Reward for good grades and getting things done on time is that you get your feedback on time and things are comfortable and you're not stressed out. And then the next step would be those natural consequences that you don't like turning things in late because you sit with the automatic 0 for a while and it produces anxiety and it's more stress on you and you get less timely feedback from your instructor. But if the natural consequences aren't working, that's when I will go ahead and add that 70% cap as an additional consequence to late work. And it's really just if I can tell that a class is not going to turn in work on time unless there's a penalty. And usually that's not the case in these upper level classes. Most of you have sorted that mess out in the 101s and 102s. It's also a class where you kind of feel uncomfortable in class because when it's not on time, because we're all talking about it and you're like, oh shoot, now mine's late. And I hopefully won't have to use that penalty. But I will start using that penalty for people who are chronically late with their work. Yeah? Okay. Now, anytime someone lets me know they're dealing with an issue, like Kayla emailed me this morning, and if she is unable to keep up with this week's work, I am extending deadlines for her because of the situation that she's in. And she's told me about that. I know what it is. We'll document it, and it's not an issue. You just need to communicate with me when you do need more time and follow Kayla's example of letting me know before you fall behind that you're dealing with an issue. Helps me help you stay on track as much as I can while you're dealing with that issue. Yeah? Okay, fantastic. Questions about late work? I always take it. If you turn it in, I will take it. If I'm sensing chronic issues with lateness, I will cap it at 70, which means you can pass, but you won't be happy. Okay, good. Other questions?
Is there a deadline for obtaining a criteria? Is there a deadline for that?
Yes, criterion will need to be used before we turn in our first. Well, no, you're in a 251 class. Criterion is optional for you. So no, there's not a deadline.
Okay.
Criterion's optional in your class. I can't make a deadline for something that's optional.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. If you're going to use it, you need to use it before you turn in the final draft of an essay. Otherwise, there's no point in using it, though. I would say that. Yeah. Okay. Other questions? All right. Help session today is at 1 o'clock. I am working from home because Hoover City Schools quarantined my kid. She's fine, but today's help session will be at 1 o'clock. I will go ahead and hold that 1 o'clock session. And I will make an announcement via Remind about tomorrow's help session as well. And that'll just depend on my family's schedule. Help sessions don't usually depend on my family's schedule because I'm usually in my office. But they do today because the girl is trying to learn virtually while I teach virtually, and that takes a little bit more coordination. We have it set up today for a help session at 1. Any questions about that? All right, fantastic. Let's take a look at week 3 and make sure we all know what we're doing in week 3. Awesome. All right, so we're going to explore our readings. We have our exploration narratives this week. You have a quiz on the explorer narratives, a discussion board, and an assignment. So I'm going to go ahead and preview the discussion board first, because that's due Wednesday at midnight. It says, please, I'll make it a little bigger. See if I can make it a little bigger. I can, there we go. All right, instead of me reading it, how about let's have you read it. Annalise, can you read the preface to the initial post, the instructions?
Please select a quote from one of our readings and place it at the top of your entry. Choose a quote that you think is the most important thing communicated by the author. Then please write a 10 to 12 sentence paragraph that does the following.
Great. And Kirsten, can you read the first 2 things that are required?
Explains in simple language what the quote means. Explains why you think it is the most important thing communicated by that author.
Great. And India, can you read the second 2 bullet points?
Yes, ma'am. Explain how the quote relates to the rest of the passage. Explain what your reader should understand about the age of exploration from this quote and this reading section as a whole.
Okay, great. So there are some specific requirements for that paragraph. It's a 10 to 12 sentence paragraph. Take the quote and put it at the top of your entry. Choose a quote that you think is the most interesting thing communicated by that author, and then explain in simple language what the quote means, why you think it's the most important thing communicated by that author, explain how the quote relates to the rest of the passage that we read, and explain what your reader should understand about the explorers and this age of exploration from the quote and from the passage as a whole. So that's going to be, it's not 4 sentences, 1 for each job. It's a few sentences for each job, and that ought to get you there. Okay. Erin, in our responses to peers, please read the preface to the responses to peers.
Respond to 3 peers posts. In each post, you can choose one of the following ways of responding.
Fantastic. And Jamisha, can you read the 2 bullet points that are the 2 different ways you can respond?
Choose another quote you think was important from the same selection and explain why you chose it. Correct their understanding of what the quote they chose meant if you think they misinterpreted.
Okay, so you can either add to what they've said or help them, okay? If you feel like let's say Naeem put something up and Corian realizes that there was a word in there that Naeem misunderstood or misinterpreted, then Corian can say, hey, this word means this. And because it means this, I think the overall quote is a little different than what you said. I think it actually means this. Right? So that's one possibility. The other possibility is to choose a different quote from the same selection and explain what it means and why you chose that one instead. So you're either adding to it or helping them out. Does that make sense? How many times do you have to do that?
Three times.
3 times. That's correct. Okay. So if you are not super confident in, and I am literally saying this word, in translating this old-fashioned language to the new language, don't choose option 2 where you correct somebody else and how they did it. Share another one and give it another try, right? So you're either helping somebody else who's struggling with that translation, or you are practicing that translation again 2 or 3 more times. Yes? Okay. So this is a lot this week about translating. You'll notice in the quiz that there are a lot of questions where I have taken a quote and then given you 4 translations of it, 4 summaries or paraphrases of it. Which one of these is accurately summing up or paraphrasing what the quote said? So I'm kind of recognizing that there's a lot of reading comprehension skill work going on this week and asking you to dive deep into that. Okay, making sure you're looking up the words, making sure that you're rephrasing things. And we're going to do a little bit of work with that together today. Your week 3 assignment, which is due Sunday, it says you have read some writing by the native peoples of America. You are now reading some work by the men who claimed to discover America. In a 10 to 12 sentence paragraph, please discuss what you have learned about the relationship of the Native Americans and the explorers from these 2 sets of readings. How has your perception of that relationship changed after reading these selections? The best responses will use quotes from at least one text to support their answer. And one of the things that we'll notice as we read these explorers is that they all talk about interactions with the native people, right? But they're talking about it from a European's point of view, which is very different from a native person's point of view, right? And I'm asking you to think critically here about what that relationship was like between the European explorers and the native people who were already here. And given what the native people wrote about the bad behavior of the people and what will come if people don't treat each other right and that sort of thing, what do you think their response would be to the explorers, right? So we're going to kind of dive into that idea, okay? And the different explorers had very different responses from different tribes of native people. So remember, one tribe might have been more friendly and another tribe might have been more hostile, right? So not every tribe was the same. We saw different tribes had different creation myths and you know, it's not all the same. People get to be different. All right. So questions about the basics of this week. Let's look at those exploration narratives. Where it says reading, I'm just making sure it says, please go to the course readings and read the 3 exploration narratives you find there. That's simple. It's just redirecting you up to course readings, okay? And these should be visible for you. So we have the exploration narratives here. So Corian, who are you going to read this week?
I'm going the Christopher Columbus, right?
Yep, that's one. Who else are you going to read this week?
Albert, I don't know how to pronounce it.
All right, we'll come back to that one then. Who's the 3rd person you're going to read?
John Smith.
Okay, does anyone want to take a crack at how to pronounce the name of our 2nd author? Naeem.
The Journey of Alvar and I give up.
No, don't give up. Come on, be brave.
Nunez Cabeza de Vaca.
Devaca, that's right. You're just not trusting yourself. You're smarter than you're giving yourself credit for. Okay, The Journey of Alvar Nunez Cabeza de Vaca. It's a long name. We're going to refer to him as Devaca. Okay, that'll make it a little easier. We will shorten it. The first time you mention him, if you're writing about him, you will use his whole name, Alvar Nunez Cabeza de Vaca, right? After that, you can refer to him as Devaca. Yes? In the quizzes, you will see that I refer to him as Devaca. Okay? All right. Questions about this? All right, I'm going to stop the share for just a second. How many of you have had a chance to look at these yet? Give me a thumbs up if you've had a chance to look at these. I see some people have done the discussion board already, so at least one person's looked at them. Monisha, Annalise, anybody else looked at them yet? Give me a thumbs up. Naeem has, fantastic. Imani, good girl, all right. Anybody else? I'm loving that there are some thumbs up. Remember, you do get an announcement on Fridays that the week for the next week is available. I know a lot of students depend on their weekends to get work done. Yes. So I'm making sure that your readings are available to you the weekend before we start. So you can make a regular practice of doing the readings for week 3 over the weekend before week 3 starts on Monday. Okay. If you want to, and that will save you some stress during the week. You're not required to. You can read them in the middle of the week, but if your college experience is anything like my college experience, you would like to have that extra weekend and have there be 2 weekends, especially for stuff that you have to have read by Wednesday, right? I don't know about you, but when I was in college, Monday and Tuesday were not the days I got stuff read. I had to read on the weekends. So if you have to read on the weekends, read them the weekend before. Yeah? Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to open one of them and we're going to read a little bit of it together because the language is thick. Okay? So we're gonna deal with some reading. How many of you love reading things out loud when they're difficult? Annalise does. Erin doesn't mind. Okay, I'm not expecting your reading to be perfect. I'm expecting you to show good reading habits. So let's go over those good reading habits. When you get to a word you don't know quickly, what do you do? Do you stop and wait for me to tell you what it is? Shrine, what do you do?
Say it out loud.
You sound it out.
I get my dictionary.
That's right. You sound it out. And if you need to, your thumb can go up to the screen just like this and cover up syllables, and you can you can go back to 4th grade. And my daughter will do that. She'll get to a word she doesn't know and she'll stop. Waiting for me to tell it to her. Do I tell it to her? I say sound it out. And what if she gets it wrong? Then I tell her how to pronounce it. Yeah. Then I tell her how to pronounce it. I'm not a total jerk. I just want her to try it first. And I'll do the same thing with y'all. If you give it a shot and it turns out wrong, I'll tell you how to pronounce it. I'm not a total jerk. But I want you to go ahead and give it a try sounding it out, okay? And we'll talk about what they mean, and we will practice using our dictionaries here in Google. And so if there is a word, how many people have a dictionary app on their phones? All right, if you have a dictionary app on your phone, you can, and you're not in class on your phone, you can get that out and do them at the same time. If you don't have a dictionary app on your phone, I do recommend that you download one. They're free. I don't pay for apps. But there are free dictionary apps, and it really would be a huge help for you to have one on your phone. I use mine all the time. And as I say, I know a lot of words already, so it gets a workout, though. That dictionary app is wonderful and worth a download. They do take a while to download, and because there's a lot of information, so it might be something to download when you're on your Wi-Fi at home rather than when you're on the LTE somewhere out in the world. All right, let's take a screen share. Let's go to the Columbus reading first. And let's examine this a little bit. Who provided this reading to us?
Christopher Columbus.
Well, he wrote it, but who's providing
The
it to
American
us?
Yelp reader.
Yes, the American Yop Reader is the person who is the entity that provided this. We'll need to know that if we cite this in a works cited list. What's the title of it?
Journal of Christopher Columbus, 1492.
Fantastic. Okay. So it says Journal of Christopher Columbus, 1492. First encounters. Please don't write 1942, y'all. I know many of you are as dyslexic with dates as I am, but this was not 1942. This is 1492. 1942 was World War II. All right. First encounters between Europeans and Native Americans were dramatic events. In this account, we see the assumptions and intentions of Christopher Columbus as he immediately began assessing the potential of these people to serve European economic interests. He also predicted easy success for missionaries seeking to convert these people to Christianity. Did Christopher Columbus write this?
No.
No. Who wrote that?
The Yelp reader, the American Yelp reader.
Yes, the editors of the American Yop Reader wrote that. So it's a little preface. Then where it says Thursday, October 11th, that's where it begins to be Columbus's language. Okay? And again, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to move y'all. Go up, go up, go up. Okay. So I'm going to show my active speakers here instead of, so it should show you one at a time when you read. Who's ready to read? I'm going to have somebody read just the part that's blue right now. Who would like to read just the part that's blue? Shane. Yes, ma'am.
Presently, many
Right, so Columbus is saying here in that first section that he finds them very friendly, that he finds them very naive. They don't know very much about the kinds of weapons that the Westerners have, that the Europeans have, right? They're very friendly. And so his response to them being friendly is, well, I think they'd make nice servants, so I took some. What's behind that attitude?
deception and selfishness.
Right, that's a really high opinion of yourself and your place in the world when you meet other people, you're like, oh, I'd like to have some of these for servants. It's such a different mindset than the 21st century mindset. It's very, very different. I don't walk into another country where I don't know people and decide that I would like to own some of them because they were nice to me. Right? Right. So, right. That's a lot. It's a very, very different mindset. Now, is he being cruel to them? Is he harming them? Is he shooting them? Is he attacking them? Is he being nice to them?
Yes. Not according to, he's, go back to it.
He's being nice, but it's kind of like a setup. Like he's just trying to deceive them.
He's portraying
to fall under his,
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. He thinks he's being nice, but this is a highly problematic moment here, yes? Where he's just like, oh, these people seem nice. Let me own 6 of them. I'll take some and bring them home to you so they can be your servants.
He has a hidden agenda. Let's say.
Right. But this is the mindset of the European explorer, and we're going to see it in other places too, right? The convert to Christianity is on the top of the list, right? To get goods and valuables from them, although he says they don't seem to have very much, right? And then to take them and use them as servants. And this is the colonialist mindset, right? It's a lot. It's a really very different mindset, right? We will see remnants of this mindset in our later readings when we are reading about slaveholders who argue that they treat their slaves well, right? Which perhaps they are in the spectrum of treating slaves well, but inherently by owning another person, you are not treating them like an equal person, right? So not well, right? because they're still your slave, right? But it doesn't come out of nowhere, right? It comes from this mindset of okay, well, it's okay to do what I'm doing as long as I'm being pleasant about it. I'm not doing it through violence, right? But it's a little crazy to look at. All right. I don't think we're struggling too much with Columbus's language. Is there anybody who is struggling to interpret what he's saying? Or are we pretty good with Columbus? All right, I'll let you finish it. Keep looking for that idea, that because what you're looking for this week is that connection between the settler or the explorers and the native people. We want to look at that. What is their relationship with the native people? What's their agenda when they're coming to this new world? What do they want to get out of it? Why have they been sent to explore the new world? Remember, they've been sent to bring back riches and glory to their original country. They want places to become part of an empire, to become part of the Spanish Empire, to become part of the British Empire. This was a time in history where countries in Europe were empire building, right? Can anybody list a few of the nations that the British Empire used to control that it does not control anymore, just as an example? Yep. The United States is one. I'll get you started there. Where else used to be a colony of England?
I think Africa.
Parts of Africa, yep. Where else? Okay, Canada had the Queen on their money until sometime when I was in school, right? So that was a long time ago. India, Hong Kong, Australia, all of those were part of the British Empire, right? All of them were part of England, right? Spain, what about Spain's empire? What did Spain control that it no longer controls? Nope. Portugal, for sure. But then Portugal separated, and then Portugal became a place where it controlled places like Brazil, which is why a lot of people in Brazil speak Portuguese, right? If you're looking at Spanish-speaking countries in Latin America, those were all conquered by Spain. That's why they speak Spanish. So everything in Latin America was part of that Spanish Empire for a while, right? That's why they speak Spanish in those countries. Any country that speaks Portuguese now was under the Portuguese Empire. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? So this was something that countries in Europe were doing all over the globe. They're saying, I'm going to run this part of the world over here as well as my own. Why would they do that? Why would they go to Mexico and decide to run Mexico from Spain? Why do that?
We don't have control.
Right? You have control over what?
The territory and borders.
The land.
The territory, the borders, the land.
In the economy.
The people, the economy, the natural resources, right? So they're getting tradable goods. They're getting gold and silver, and in some cases, especially in Africa, diamonds. In India, they were getting all sorts of goods. They were getting spices that were highly valuable. They were getting diamond mines in India in some cases. They were getting, so they wanted things that were going to make their country rich and profitable, and they got them by taking over that part of the world, subjugating the people who were already living there and having them be their subjects, and then by sending colonists to live there, just like they did in the United States, right? That's why South Africa had apartheid for a long time, because the white people had settled it and had made the black people who had already living in South Africa had been enslaved to them for a really long time, right? So this happens all over the globe. So there's a while where this is what European countries were doing. They were going, they were going to other countries in the world and subjugating the native people and sending colonists to live there, govern the other people there, and bring the riches back to the country. That's why we're going to see the American colonists decide that they don't like the way they're being treated. And we'll see that in the other readings, but we got to get our heads around this mindset of these European colonialists or empire builders or imperialists who are going all around the globe saying, okay, this territory is now Spain. Everything of value in it now belongs to Spain, including the people in it, right? So that's the mindset we have. All right, let's take a look at Devaca. Devaca is a little harder to read. And I'll make it a little bit bigger, but I'm trying to give you guys relatively short passages because they are kind of thick reading. Okay, so the annotation, was the annotation written by Devaca or no?
No.
No. Okay, so that's just the little introduction, right? But then we do have the document down below, and we'll go ahead and do a little bit of reading there. Someone who has not read yet, read that first half of that paragraph to us, to Flight. Someone who hasn't read yet.
We traveled.
Okay, tell Andrea, you're good.
We traveled over a great part of the country and found it all deserted, as the people had fled to the mountains, leaving houses and fields out of fear of the Christians. This filled our hearts with sorrow. Seeing the land so fertile and beautiful, so full of water and streams, but abandoned, and the places burned down, and the people so thin and wan, fleeing and hiding, and as they did not raise any crops, their destitution had become so great that they ate tree bark and roots. They brought us blankets, which they had been concealing from the Christians, and gave them to us, and then told us how the Christians had penetrated into the country before and had destroyed and burnt the villages, taking with them half of the men and all the women and the children, and how those who could escape by flight.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for reading that. Someone who has not read yet, finish out that paragraph.
Seeing them in this flight, afraid to stay anywhere, and they neither would nor could cultivate the soil, preferring to die rather than suffer such cruelties. While they showed the greatest pleasure at being with us, we began to apprehend that the Indians who were in the arms against the Christians might ill-treat us in the retaliation for what the Christians did to them. But when it pleased God our Lord to take us to those Indians, they respected us and held us precious, as the former had done, and even a little more, at which we were not a little astonished, while it clearly shows how, in order to bring those people to Christianity and obedience until your imperial majesty, they should be treated well and not otherwise.
Great. So that's wonderful. I'm going to skip us down just a little bit. And I'm going to have us read this paragraph together. Someone who has not read, please read the first part of that paragraph. It starts with thereupon and ends with peace. Someone who hasn't read yet.
Thereupon we had many and bitter quarrels with the Christians, for they wanted to make slaves of our Indians, and we grew so angry at it that our departure we forgot to take along many bows, pouches, and arrows, also the 5 emeralds, and so they were left and lost to us. We gave the Christians a great many cowskin robes and other objects, and had much trouble in persuading the Indians to return home and plant their crops in peace.
Great. And who can finish out that paragraph for us? Someone who hasn't read yet, finish out that paragraph.
They insisted upon accompanying, geez, I cannot talk today, accompanying us until, according to their custom, we should be in the custody of other Indians, because otherwise they were afraid to die. Besides, as long as we were with them, they had no fear of the Christians and of their lances. At all this, the Christians were greatly vexed, and told their own interpreter to say that the Indians, how we were of their own race, but had gone astray for a long while, and we were people of no luck and little heart, whereas they were the lords of the land, whom they should obey and serve.
All right, so let's stop the share for a second and talk about this. Devaca, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Devaca. Devaca was an explorer who went out and he was serving a queen like the others, but he actually decided that he was going to live with the Native Americans for years. And kind of, instead of conquering them, decided just to live with them, which is a very different kind of attitude than Columbus, who was like, oh, I found these people, I'll take them back with me and have them be my servants. He keeps referring to the Christians as a separate entity from his own group. His own group was living with the Native Americans, right? He found the Native Americans, he got to know the Native Americans, he got to respect and admire the Native Americans, and he decided to live with the Native Americans for a while. And this kind of horrified the people who were trying to convert the Native Americans to Christianity, and and it also tells us a lot about how the Christian missionaries were working at this point in time. How many of you have gone on a mission trip? Anybody gone on a mission trip with your church? Anybody have a friend who's talked about going on a mission trip with their church?
I've watched a girl online go on a mission trip, and I've always wanted to go on one.
Sure. So missionary work is just the idea that if you go to another land where the culture is not Christian, and right now the idea is that if you serve them and talk to them about Christianity, maybe they'll join you in being Christian, and it's a lot healthier than it used to be. That didn't used to be the missionary mindset. The missionary mindset during the Age of Exploration was it is horrifying that anyone is not Christian. And we're going to set out to change that, because if you're not Christian, you're evil, and we will change you by force if necessary, right? And that's what when Devaca refers to Christians here, he's talking about people who had decided to convert the native people by force. How does that go? Kirsten's like, I don't think that's the way to go. Right. It doesn't always go well to try to convert someone by force, although it certainly can work if people are afraid to do anything else. But whether it happens in their hearts or not is another issue. And it probably, we have a lot of strange Christian habits. Let's think about bringing a tree inside at Christmas time. Does anybody know where the roots of bringing a tree inside at Christmas came from? we got to talk about this a little bit, because Christianity has a long history of changing other people from other religions into Christianity, but letting them keep a lot of what they had going on already. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So the Christmas trees were a pagan idea, that in the winter you wanted to bring extra light inside your house. You wanted to celebrate nature, and you would bring a tree in and put lights on it and put lots of lights in your house to celebrate the solstice, the winter solstice, which happens around the 21st of December, right? Well, when the Christians decided to make inroads with those pagans, there was no way the pagans were going to give up this wonderful solstice festival, because it was awesome. So they said, okay, that can be part of Christianity, and it has been ever since. Y'all, Easter, bunnies and eggs, right? Again, pagan ideas about celebrating fertility and the spring equinox, right, are coming into that Easter tradition, and have from the very beginning, because you can't really totally convert somebody without letting them keep a little bit of what they had. And so we see a lot of these pagan things come into the Christianity and stick around for centuries, right? So when we have, let's see, how many of you know about Mexico's tradition of the Day of the Dead? What's that? Jabria, I see you nodding. Talk to me for a sec.
What they call it, De La Muertes or something like that?
Yeah, Dia de la Muerta. Yep. So what is it?
They go to the grave sites of their loved ones and they celebrate them, I guess you should say.
Right. And what does it look like? We have some, I bet we all know some Dia de los Muertos images in our heads. What are some of those images? I think the movie Coco, if you saw that kid's movie.
With the diamonds on them and stuff.
Right, those decorated skeletons that have the bright flowers and all of that. And then they would make these altars to their dead. That is, again, a mixture of what the native culture was when the Christians got there and the Christian All Saints Day, right? So they merged those traditions together, and it still lasts. That's why it's a different celebration of All Saints Day in Mexico than it is here in the United States, right? Those cultures melded, right? And they melded at this point in time where the Christians are going in and saying, you can't be a heathen anymore. That was their name. They can't be a heathen. Somebody who's not Christian was called a heathen. And they said, you can't do that anymore. We're going to make you be Christian, right? So in some of these exploration narratives, we're actually seeing that attempt to convert. And we're seeing that sometimes it was very violent. And then sometimes people were like, hey, well, maybe if you just stay with us, we'll treat you well. Which do you think is going to end up being more successful? What does Devaca say is going to be more successful? Because Devaca's trying to ultimately convert them to serve Her Majesty as well. But what does he say has to happen? We just read it in that paragraph. Well, how does he say you have to treat them? Let's read it. Let's share it together and let's read it. So they were upset, but it said, I'll back it up because it was up at the top. They should be well treated and not otherwise, right? It shows us how, in order to bring those people to Christianity and obedience until your imperial majesty, they should be well treated and not otherwise, right? So he's talking about that difference between conversion by force and conversion by good example. Keep in mind, though, none of them are trying to just let the people not be converted. Right? Letting them just remain heathens is not really part of this conversation. Does that make sense? We kind of have to accept that. Okay, good. John Smith. Now, I want to talk about why Columbus and Devaca were relatively easy to read, and that's because they were translated from Portuguese and Spanish into 20th century English by 20th century writers. We are about to read John Smith, who, since he was writing in English, was not translated by a 20th century author, right? Not translated by a 20th century translator like the other two. The other two, we have a 20th century translator, okay? And in this one, we don't. So you're going to see his is way harder to read and understand than the other two. Okay, let's take a quick look. Who is he writing to? Who is John Smith writing to in this?
The Queen.
Which queen?
Queen Anne.
Queen Anne of Britain. That's my girl. All right. To Queen Anne of Britain. When? 1616. So even between Columbus and this letter, so this age of exploration was like 200 years. We've got to kind of keep that in mind, right? This lasted until the colonial period, which was in like the late 1700s, the 1700s was when the Declaration of Independence was drafted. So it's a long time that people are exploring and beginning to colonize, right? All right, I'm going to read this first one, and then I'll challenge you to read a sentence or two here and there. The love I bear my God, my King and country, hath so oft emboldened me in the worst of extreme dangers, that now honesty doth constrain me to presume, thus far beyond myself, to present your majesty this short discourse. If ingratitude be a deadly poison to all honest virtues, I must be guilty of that crime if I should omit any means to be thankful. What on earth is he saying there? I know, right? It's a lot, but what he's actually saying is quite short. Can anybody sum it up for me? Do you need to see it again to sum it up? All right, I'm going to sum it up for you. Go ahead, Strain, give it a shot.
The conditions when he finally made it there, he was just kind of writing back home to let her know what the conditions were of the land and the people.
Yes, and what he's saying is, okay, I've been through a hard time and I need to write to you about what's been going on. And I need to express my gratitude. This is a letter explaining something I am grateful for. That's where he says, if ingratitude be a deadly poison to all honest virtues, I must be guilty of that crime if I should omit by any means to be thankful. So he's writing a letter of thanks, right? He doesn't want to seem ungrateful, but he's been through a massive trauma, right? He's about to tell her this trauma, but thank you anyway for sending me over here to get, nearly beaten to death by the tribe of these people. Okay, so there is a lot. Who is he writing about? I'm going to just ask that question. Who is he writing about?
The natives?
He's writing about a particular group of natives, the Powhatan tribe and their chief king, okay? His son Nantaquas, I'm not really sure. And famous name, who is he writing about? Pocahontas, yes. And he is the king's daughter, right? Being but a child of 12 or 13 years of age, okay? And she ends up being imprisoned by her father for defending these explorers And it says down here at the end, down here toward the bottom, about 2 years after she herself was taken prisoner, being so detained near 2 years longer, the colony by that means was relieved, and she ended up marrying who?
John Smith.
John Smith.
John Smith.
So let's do a little bit of math. She's either 12 or 13 when they meet, and this is 2 plus 2 years later. How old is she when they get married?
Roughly
13.
16 or 17 years old. Okay. And he met her when she was 12 or 13. I think we really need to put into context how very, very young she is when you're reading this. And we don't have time to read a ton of it together because our time is drawing to a close. But as you are reading that letter from John Smith, number one, read it out loud because it's going to make you deal with the words you don't know. I would say do one read through to get a list of words you need to look up, and then read it again with some synonyms, with some easier synonyms in, so that you can read it and try to understand it. I want you to read it with this in mind. She is 12 when they first meet. And so whenever it says that she took a beating to save him from being beaten to death, she's 12. Right? We really need to grapple with how young she is. How old are y'all? Y'all are like, some of y'all are like as young as 17 or 18. Am I right? Some of you are.
I'm 20.
You're 20. Who's our youngest baby? Who thinks they're our youngest baby in here? Jamisha, how old are you, Liv?
19.
You're 19. She's 7 years younger than you. 12-year-olds are in 6th grade, y'all. She's a 6th grader. I think we need to kind of think this. Right, so as you're reading through, can you please keep Pocahontas's age in mind? She's a 6th grader when this story starts. And by the time she was a sophomore in high school age, she's married this guy. Okay? He's not super old, but he's old enough to have been made the captain of this expedition. So he is not young. He is not her age. We need to read it with a lot of that in mind. Yes? Okay.
Disney didn't say nothing like that.
Mm-hmm.
They did not say he was R. Kelly.
Well, yeah, well, Disney's, well, we should deal with the Disney rendition of this at some point, shouldn't we? Because that's a whole different story. All right. I would love to talk about what Disney has done with this story. And if anybody wants to kind of rewatch the Disney Pocahontas and then read this, or read this and then rewatch the Disney Pocahontas, that would be fantastic. I fully support that because I think what Disney did with this story is strange. All right, I'm going to have you go. If you have questions that you need answered before you get prepped for Wednesday, go ahead and ask them. You are trying to figure out that relationship between the explorers and the native people this week. That's a lot of what we're thinking about. You are also trying to just work on your translation skills, these old-fashioned language pieces and how to translate them. I would encourage you to work on something that's hard for you. So if you're understanding Columbus and you're understanding Devaca, pick the John Smith to work on a discussion board so that you can kind of get some help with it. I would rather you grapple with something really difficult and get parts of it wrong than just mail it in. Yeah? So use the discussion board to get some help. If there's a passage where you're trying to understand it, try working it out in discussion board and get the help of your peers and your instructor in helping you understand it. You'll get full participation credit even if you're struggling to understand it. So use that discussion board to help you figure out the passages you're struggling with. And that's okay. All right? Okay, cool, y'all. You're good to log out if you know what you're doing for Wednesday. If you need additional support, or if I've asked to speak with you, stay in. Or if you didn't hear your name called on roll at the beginning.
I wasn't in the class at the beginning, so.
Shrain, let me make sure. Shrain, I got you. I'll make sure I mark you. Thank you, ma'am.
All right, thank you, Dr.
I was
Lundberg.
in, but my phone died.
Amaya, I saw you come in, but I'm not sure I marked you. I'll double check it. Thank you.
I came in late also.
Trinity, thank you so much for letting me know you're in. I'll mark you as present. Anybody else not hear their name called?
I
Charm?
came in late.
I thought I got you, but I will double check it, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Swartzberg,
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to know, is there any kind of, can I connect